Also at 5, the funeral for motorcycle gang leader Harry Taco Bowman will be held here in Dayton this weekend. In 1935, at a bar on Route 66 in McCook, Illinois, a group of factory workers formed a motorcycle club. 90 years later, that club controls a criminal empire worth potentially billions, 441 chapters in 43 countries and more than 5,000 members. They are older than the Hells Angels and more ruthless than the Pagans. On April 27, 1974, 3 Hells Angels were found in Florida, executed and beheaded. The Outlaws sent a message. The war continues to this day. This is America's oldest outlaw motorcycle gang, the birth of an empire. Matilda's Bar, a working-class joint where electro-automotive company workers drank after shifts, stood on Route 66 in McCook. In 1935, John Davis gathered friends at that bar, and they formed the McCook Outlaws Motorcycle Club. No one knew then that they had created the world's oldest outlaw biker club. World War II interrupted the club. Members were shipped overseas. Those who returned came back harder and more violent. In May 1946, the Outlaws attended the first post-war motorcycle rally at Soldier Field in Chicago, veterans who had seen combat and didn't fit into civilian life. By 1950, the club had exploded in size as members from across Chicago joined. The McCook Outlaws became the Chicago Outlaws with a South Side headquarters. They redesigned their logo. A small skull replaced the winged motorcycle, and in 1954, crossed pistons were added below the skull. They called the symbol Charlie. It would become one of the most feared emblems in America. In 1963, the Outlaws became the first certified one-percenter club east of the Mississippi. A label derived from the American Motorcyclist Association's claim that 99% of motorcyclists were law-abiding and 1% were outlaws. The club embraced the label and added a diamond patch to their vests with 1% inscribed inside. July 1964 brought consolidation. Multiple clubs merged under the Outlaws banner, the Gypsy Outlaws of Milwaukee and Louisville, and clubs from New York, making them the largest one-percenter club east of the Mississippi. On January 1, 1965, they officially incorporated as the American Outlaws Association, a criminal enterprise disguised as a motorcycle club. They even added a middle finger patch mocking the AMA logo as a mark of ultimate rebellion. Expansion continued. In 1967, they absorbed the Iron Cross Club in West Palm Beach and spread from the Midwest into the South. In 1969, the club adopted its defining motto, God forgives. Outlaws don't. The Outlaws enforced strict rules. Membership was limited to white males over 21. Motorcycles had to be American-made and at least 750 cubic centimeters. Colors were black and white, and skull imagery and death's head symbols were required. Members who killed for the club earned twin lightning bolt tattoos, SS-style symbols glorifying murder. The Outlaws were not motorcycle enthusiasts so much as a criminal organization. The rivalry with the Hells Angels escalated into open war. On December 31, 1973, New Year's Eve, 3 outlaws from Florida arrived at the Hells Angels clubhouse in New York City. Accounts differ, but violence erupted. The Hells Angels tracked those men back to Florida and sought revenge. On April 27, 1974, in Fort Lauderdale, 3 Massachusetts Hells Angels lured the targets to a construction site, executed them with shots to the back of the head, beheaded them, and dumped the bodies in a gravel pit. The outlaws made clear they would not yield. The Hells Angels declared total war, not temporary, not local. The conflict produced tragic collateral damage. On June 9, 1974, in Akron, Ohio, 3 Hells Angels opened fire with submachine guns and shotguns, aiming for Outlaws member Stephen Warco. They struck the wrong house, and a civilian, Donaldera, was killed. On January 7, 1975, a suitcase bomb exploded in a Cleveland home, killing 3 people, including a 2-year-old, and critically injuring others, including a 9-month-old. The Hells Angels had acted on faulty intelligence. Between 1974 and 1982, at least 20 homicides were linked directly to the war. The true number was likely much higher. International expansion began in 1977 when Canada's Satan's Choice chapters patched over to the Outlaws, opening cross-border drug routes and triggering the first Canadian Biker War from 1977 to 1984. By 1980, there had been 20 to 30 murders. Another 42 occurred between 1981 and 1984. On March 21, 1978, Outlaws Montreal president Gil Carteret was killed when a bomb under his car exploded on Bordeaux Street. On April 25, 1978, 2 Hells Angels entered the Outlaws clubhouse and opened fire, wounding several. The following day, Outlaws member Anis Markopoulos was murdered by 2 Hells Angels. Violence spread through whole regions. The Wild Ones Motorcycle Club in Hamilton was caught in the crossfire because of its association with the Hells Angels. The Outlaws killed members systematically. Bombings left men like Dennis Stewart and Danny Powell dead or maimed. 5 Wild Ones were killed before the club disbanded. By the mid-1980s, over 100 people had been killed in the broader conflict. The Hells Angels eventually dominated Canada. The Outlaws retreated to Ontario, but the rivalry never ended. Both clubs went global. The Outlaws opened chapters in France, 1993, Australia, 1994, and Norway, 1995, and spread across Europe to Belgium, England, Germany, Ireland, Russia, and Spain. In November 2006, they opened their first major Far East chapter in Okinawa City, Japan. Today, they claim 43 countries, 441 chapters, and over 5,000 members, making them the second-largest outlaw motorcycle club worldwide. New acronyms and slogans appeared, overt expressions of hatred and intimidation, and the war continued on multiple continents. Over time, the Outlaws evolved into a sophisticated criminal organization built on violence, drugs, and intimidation. Their structure mirrored organized crime and international president-controlled operations. Regional presidents reported to him, and chapter presidents answered to regional leaders. Members paid dues, about $1,200 annually, attended mandatory weekly meetings, and participated in frequent runs. Communications, logistics, and operations were coordinated like a corporate enterprise, except it was a violent criminal corporation. Drug trafficking became the foundation of their wealth. The Outlaws produced, transported, and distributed methamphetamine nationwide. They moved cocaine from South America through Florida and Texas and trafficked large quantities of marijuana. Authorities estimated hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue, with some estimates exceeding $1 billion. They ran prostitution rings, controlling strippers and escort agencies, and treated women as property in some chapters, even making older women wear vests labeled property of the Outlaws. Weapons trafficking and illegal firearms sales funded other groups. They smuggled guns across borders. Money laundering was handled through front businesses, motorcycle shops, t-shirt stores, bars, and tattoo parlors, while extortion and protection rackets brought additional income as bar owners and small business operators paid for protection. Strip club owners were expected to pay tribute. Those who refused faced fire bombings. The Outlaws ran illegal gambling operations, including sports betting, card games, and underground casinos in multiple cities. They committed insurance fraud through staged accidents and inflated claims, systematically defrauding companies. Motorcycle and parts theft were also common. They stole bikes, dismantled them, sold the parts through repair shops, and transported stolen motorcycles across state lines. Arson was a frequent weapon. They burned down rival clubhouses and destroyed businesses that refused to pay. They also carried out contract killings for the right price. The outlaws handled assassinations. The Department of Justice identified the outlaws as one of the big four outlaw motorcycle gangs, along with the Hells Angels, Bandidos, and Pagans, each considered a major domestic threat. The FBI estimated that these clubs together generated around $1 billion in illegal income annually. The outlaws controlled a significant portion, but their empire required enforcement, someone ruthless enough to maintain control through fear. That man was Harry Taco Bowman. The rise of Harry Taco Bowman. Harry Joseph Bowman earned the nickname Taco because of his dark complexion, which made him appear Hispanic to fellow members. Born July 17, 1949, in Michigan, he grew up in a working-class family and graduated from Port Huron Catholic High School. Former classmates described him as friendly and ordinary. No one imagined he would become one of America's most notorious criminals. Bowman joined the Outlaws and became president of the Detroit chapter in 1970 at just 21 years old. Harold Henderson, the national president based in Dayton, mentored him, teaching him the methods of drug trafficking, violence, and control. Bowman became national vice president in the late 1970s and by 1984 had risen to international president at age 35. For the next 15 years, he ruled the Outlaws with absolute authority, transforming them from a regional gang into a global criminal empire. Bowman maintained a respectable public image. He lived in Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan, with his wife and daughters, in a nice home with private schools and a bulletproof Cadillac. Outwardly, he appeared to be a businessman, but behind the scenes he ordered murders, fire bombings, beatings, kidnappings, and extortion. He built a criminal machine that generated hundreds of millions in drug profits. Detective Philip Reich described Bowman as a very interesting, bright guy. I can't say I admired what he did for a living, but I admired his leadership abilities. Bowman owned several legitimate front businesses, including a motorcycle repair shop and a t-shirt store. One of his shirt designs featured pistols pointed at Detroit's Renaissance Center with the caption, "Visit Detroit, Murder City." However, Bowman's leadership depended on fear and violence. He enforced discipline through terror. Daytona Bike Week, March 1992. During the annual event, a former probationary member named Erwin Nissen argued with Atlanta chapter president James Milan. It was a serious mistake. Bowman summoned Nissen, and other members locked his motorcycle so he couldn't escape. The next morning, they brought him to Bowman's motel room. Bowman punched him in the face, pressed a knife to his ear, and threatened to kill him. On his orders, others beat and kicked Nissen before Bowman gave the command, "Get rid of him." Nissen was thrown from a 3-story balcony, suffering multiple broken bones and severe injuries. The message was clear: never challenge leadership. Bowman ordered multiple murders, including the 1991 killing of Raymond Chaffin of the Warlocks, as well as bombings of rival clubhouses and organized violence against the Hells Angels and Pagans. His personal motto was, "Snitches are a dying breed." At his peak, the FBI estimated Bowman controlled 64 chapters in the United States and additional chapters in 8 other countries. But as with most empires built on violence, his would eventually fall. The fall of Taco Bowman. In August 1997, federal prosecutors unsealed a massive indictment against Bowman. He faced charges of racketeering, murder, conspiracy, drug trafficking, and weapons violations. The indictment detailed his 20-year reign and exposed the club's extensive criminal enterprise. Bowman went into hiding. On March 14, 1998, the FBI added him to its 10 most wanted list. He was the 453rd person ever to be placed there, with a $50,000 reward for his capture. His face appeared in post offices across the country, and America's Most Wanted profiled him. For 15 months, Bowman evaded capture with the help of the Detroit and Chicago mobs. On June 7, 1999, the FBI surrounded a home in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Bowman was inside with his family. His time on the run ended. Trial and conviction. Bowman's trial began in April 2001 in Tampa, Florida. Security was extreme. At least 16 U.S. Marshals were present in the courtroom at all times with armed motorcades and daily bomb sweeps. Prosecutors presented 22 Outlaws members and 56 charges involving drugs, weapons, arson, robbery, extortion, kidnapping, and murder. But Bowman's case was the centerpiece. 10 racketeering counts, including conspiracy to commit murder. The key witness was Wayne Joe Black Hicks, Bowman's former enforcer and Florida operations leader, who turned informant. Other witnesses included former outlaws who testified from prison, men who had made deals to reduce their own sentences. They described murders, assaults, sexual violence, bombings, and vast drug operations. The defense argued that Bowman was merely a motorcycle club leader, being blamed for the crimes of rogue members. The jury disagreed. On April 17, 2001, Bowman was found guilty on 8 counts, including 4 RICO violations, conspiracy to commit murder, drug offenses, and weapons charges. On July 27, 2001, Judge James Moody sentenced him to 2 life terms, plus additional sentences totaling decades more, along with $18,000 in restitution. Bowman remained calm, smiled at his attorney, and left the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit. No family members or outlaws attended. Between the 1990s and early 2000s, federal prosecutors convicted 29 Outlaws members. Tampa became the center of federal action against the group, but the Outlaws endured. They rebuilt and continued operations. The end of Taco Bowman and the survival of the Outlaws. On March 3, 2019, Harry Taco Bowman died of cancer at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina. He was 69 years old and had served 18 years of his sentence. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of the organization he helped build. Today, the Outlaws still operate 441 chapters across 43 countries with more than 5,000 members, remaining the second largest outlaw motorcycle club in the world after the Hells Angels. The violent rivalry between the two continues, 5 decades of bloodshed with no end in sight. The Outlaws remain classified as an organized crime group by the U.S. Department of Justice, the Criminal Intelligence Service of Canada, and Europol. Their activities still include drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, prostitution, murder, and extortion. Recent incidents confirm their continued criminal presence. Their motto endures: God forgives. Outlaws don't, and they mean it.